One sentence. That was all it took to turn the most powerful man on Wall Street into a statue. We aren't talking about a simple insult. We are talking about a man whose net worth rivals the GDP of small nations, a man who eats senators for breakfast. He was sitting in the most exclusive booth in Manhattan, surrounded by armed security, when a 24-year-old waitress leaned in to pour his sparkling water. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She whispered 7 words, and suddenly Garrick Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Vanguard, stood up so fast his chair crashed backward, shattering the silence of the room. His face went pale. His hands shook. What did she say? And why did he wire her $5 million the very next morning? To understand the weight of that night, you have to understand the venue. We are talking about L'Obsidienne, located on the 45th floor of a nameless skyscraper on Park Avenue. There is no sign out front. You don't make a reservation at L'Obsidienne. You are invited. If you have to ask about the price of the risotto, security will politely escort you to the elevator. It was Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. Outside New York City was being battered by freezing rain, but inside the air smelled of white truffles and old money. Enter Cassidy Miller. Cassidy wasn't supposed to be working the VIP section that night. She was a floater, the staff member, who picks up the slack, polishes the silverware, and stays out of sight. Cassidy was invisible by design. She was 24, with tired eyes, that she hid behind a polite smile, and hair pulled back so tight it gave her a headache. She was working 3 jobs to pay for her father's legal appeals, a man currently rotting in Rikers Island for a white-collar crime he swore he didn't commit. The maître d' nervous Frenchman, named Louis, grabbed Cassidy by the arm near the kitchen pass. "Listen to me," he hissed, sweating through his collar. Victor called in sick. "You're on table 1. Cassidy felt her stomach drop. Table 1 wasn't just a table. It was his table. Garrick Sterling. If you read the Financial Times or watch Bloomberg, you know the name. Garrick Sterling is the Wolf of the Hudson. He made his first billion in the late 90s during the dot-com boom, not by building companies but by dismantling them. He was a corporate raider, a man who bought beloved family businesses, fired thousands of workers to strip the assets, and sold the scraps for profit. He was cold, calculated, and famously abusive to service staff. "Louis, I can't," Cassidy whispered. "You know he fired the last girl because her perfume was too floral." "You don't have a choice, Miller," Louis snapped, shoving a tray of crystal water glasses into her hands. "Just pour the water, serve the wine, and do not speak unless spoken to. If you mess this up, you aren't just fired. You're blacklisted in this city." Cassidy took a deep breath. She adjusted her apron. She walked out onto the floor. At table 1, Garrick Sterling sat alone. This was unusual. Usually he was surrounded by lawyers or young models paid to laugh at his jokes. Tonight he was solitary, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the rain-lashed city below. He wore a charcoal bespoke suit that cost more than Cassidy made in 5 years. As she approached, the atmosphere around the table felt heavier, like the gravity was stronger there. 2 security guards in plain clothes stood 10 feet away, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. Cassidy stepped up to the table. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. He didn't look at her. He didn't even blink. He just raised a hand, dismissing her greeting as if swatting away a fly. "Sparkling," he grunted. Cassidy nodded and reached for the bottle of San Pellegrino. As she poured, she watched his hands. They were calloused strange for a billionaire. He was clutching a heavy gold signet ring on his pinky finger, twisting it violently. She noticed something else. On the table next to his untouched bread plate was a folder. It was stamped with the logo of Vanguard Legal, his private firm. The edge of a document was sticking out. Most people wouldn't have noticed the date on that document. But Cassidy Miller wasn't most people. She had spent the last 4 years studying legal briefs, trying to free her father. She had an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive. She saw a name on the document, Project Oakhaven, and suddenly the air left her lungs. Oakhaven. It was a word she hadn't heard in 20 years. Not since the night the fire happened. Not since the night her childhood was incinerated. Her hand trembled. A single drop of water missed the glass and landed on the pristine white tablecloth. The reaction was instant. Garrick Sterling slammed his fist onto the table. The silverware jumped. The entire restaurant, filled with bankers, celebrities, and politicians, went deadly silent. "Are you incompetent?" Sterling barked, finally turning his cold grey eyes onto her. "Do they pick you people up off the street? I am wearing a $40,000 suit, and you are splashing water like a toddler in a bath." Louis the maitre d' was already sprinting across the dining room, his face pale with terror. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. She is new, she is—" "Get her out of my sight," Sterling sneered, picking up his napkin and throwing it onto the wet spot. "And bring me a bottle of the 98 Petrus, and someone who knows how to pour it." Cassidy stood there frozen. The humiliation was burning her cheeks. She could feel the eyes of the entire room on her. This was it. She was fired. She would lose the income she needed for her dad's lawyer. They were going to lose the appeal. She looked at Sterling. He had already turned back to the window, dismissing her as a non-entity. He was a man who thought he was a god. He thought he could crush people, her father, her family, her, and never look back. Something inside Cassidy snapped. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. She remembered the stories her father told her before he was framed. She remembered the Oakhaven land deal. She remembered the man who had visited their house just days before the accident that burned down their family business and the archives within it. A man with a gold signet ring. She looked at the ring on Sterling's finger. It was a crest, a wolf holding a dagger. The memory flooded back. She was 4 years old, hiding under the oak desk in her father's study. A man was yelling at her dad. "Sign the deed, Miller, or the ash will settle on everything you love." That man was Garrick Sterling. But he looked different then, younger. But the ring was the same. Lewis grabbed Cassidy's arm to drag her away. "Move, you idiot," he whispered. Cassidy pulled her arm free. "Wait," she said. "What?" Lewis gasped. "Don't say a word. Go to the kitchen." Cassidy ignored him. She took one step closer to Garrick Sterling. The security guards tensed up, hands moving toward their jackets. "Mr. Sterling," Cassidy said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence of the restaurant like a razor blade. Sterling sighed an exaggerated sound of boredom. He didn't turn around. "If you are begging for your tip, you are wasting my oxygen." Cassidy leaned down. She brought her face inches from his ear. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and expensive scotch. She whispered the sentence. "The ash from the Oakhaven fire never settled Garrick, because I was under the desk when you lit the match." The reaction was visceral. It was as if someone had shot him. Garrick Sterling, the man of iron, the man who never flinched, didn't just turn around. He erupted. He scrambled up from his chair so violently that the heavy oak chair toppled backward with a deafening crash. He spun around, his eyes wide, the pupils dilated in pure, unadulterated horror. His face, usually flushed with arrogance, drained of all color until he looked like a corpse. "What did you say?" he gasped. His voice wasn't a bark anymore. It was a trembling croak. The security guards rushed in. "Sir, is everything okay? Did she threaten you?" One of them grabbed Cassidy by the shoulder. "Get your hands off her!" Sterling screamed at his own guard. The entire restaurant was watching. Forks were suspended in mid-air. No one ate. No one breathed. Sterling stared at Cassidy. He looked at her eyes, really looked at them for the first time. He was searching for the 4-year-old girl he thought had died in that fire 20 years ago. "Impossible," he whispered. You're dead. Everyone in that house died." Cassidy stood tall. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. "Ghosts don't serve water, Mr. Sterling, but they do remember." Garrick Sterling was breathing hard, clutching his chest. For a moment, it looked like he might have a heart attack right there on the plush carpet of l'Obsidian. "Clear the room," Sterling commanded. Louis, the manager, blinked. "Sir, this is a fully booked service. We have the senator at table 4, and I said clear the damn room." Sterling roared, his voice cracking. "Buy everyone's dinner. Give them $1,000 cash for the inconvenience. I don't care. Get them out. Now." The power of a billionaire is a terrifying thing. Within 3 minutes, the finest restaurant in New York was empty. The senator, the models, the bankers all ushered out into the rain. The doors were locked. The blinds were drawn. It was just Cassidy Sterling and his head of security, a massive man named Brock. Sterling pointed to the chair opposite him. "Sit." Cassidy didn't move. "I prefer to stand." "Sit down." He slammed his hand on the table again. Cassidy sat. She knew she was in dangerous territory. This wasn't a customer complaint anymore. This was a hostage situation. Sterling poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking so badly the bottle clinked against the glass. He downed it in one gulp. "Who sent you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Was it Archer? Is this a competitor's play? How much did they pay you to learn that name?" "No one sent me," Cassidy said calmly. "And I didn't learn the name. I lived it." "Liar," Sterling hissed. "The Oakhaven fire was an accident, faulty wiring. The police report confirms it. The coroner's report confirms 3 bodies. Theodore Miller, his wife Martha, and their daughter Cassidy." "The coroner was paid off," Cassidy said, "just like the fire inspector. My father got me out through the window before the roof collapsed. My mother, she didn't make it. My father changed my name, hid me in the foster system to keep me safe from you, and then turned himself in for fraud, just to get into federal custody, the only place your hitmen couldn't reach him." Sterling's eyes narrowed. He was calculating. He was a shark, and he was looking for blood in the water. If you are who you say you are, you know what happened to the deed. "The deed to the lithium deposits under the Oakhaven estate," Cassidy corrected him. Sterling froze. "That's right," Cassidy continued. "You didn't want the house. You wanted the land, specifically the mineral rights. You killed my mother for a lithium mine that made you your first 100 million. Sterling signaled to Brock. The security guard stepped forward, reaching inside his jacket. "You are making a very serious accusation, young lady," Sterling said, his voice returning to its icy calm. "One that could get you killed. You have no proof, just stories. And in this world, stories don't matter. Evidence matters." "Do you have evidence?" Cassidy smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Why do you think I waited until tonight, Mr. Sterling? Why tonight specifically?" Sterling paused. "Why? Because," Cassidy said, glancing at the folder on the table. "I needed you to bring the other half of the key." Sterling looked down at the folder. Project Oakhaven. He had brought the old files to review because he was finally selling the land tomorrow. He looked back at Cassidy. You think you can blackmail me?" Sterling laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Brock, escort Miss Miller to the roof. I think she needs some fresh air. Maybe she'll slip." Brock moved in, grabbing Cassidy's arm with a grip like iron. "If I don't call my contact in 5 minutes," Cassidy said quickly, wincing from the pain, "an email goes out to the FBI, the SEC, and the New York Times. I have people at all those organizations," Sterling scoffed. "They bury stories for me." "Do you have people at the Zurich Cantonal Bank?" Cassidy asked. Brock stopped pulling. Sterling went rigid. "What did you say?" Sterling whispered. "My father didn't just hide me," Cassidy said, staring Sterling in the eyes. "He hid the original geological surveys and the arsonist's confession inside a safety deposit box in Zurich. A digital dead man's switch. And the password is the serial number of the signet ring on your finger." Sterling looked at his hand. He looked at the ring. The ring he had worn every day for 30 years. The ring he had used to strike fear into his enemies. He realized with dawning horror that he had been wearing the evidence of his own destruction on his hand the entire time. "Let her go," Sterling whispered. "Boss," Brock asked, confused. "I said let her go." Brock released her. Cassidy rubbed her arm. "Now," Cassidy said, taking the bottle of 98 Petrus and pouring herself a glass. "We are going to negotiate, and you're going to listen. Because the price of that wine, that's nothing compared to what this is going to cost you." But Cassidy had made a mistake. She thought she had him cornered. She didn't realize that a trapped wolf doesn't surrender. It bites. Sterling sat back, his shock fading, replaced by a sinister calm. He tapped a button on his smartwatch. A silent alarm. "You're right, Cassidy," Sterling said softly. "We should talk, but not here. It's too public." Suddenly the lights in the restaurant cut out. Pitch black. Cassidy heard the sound of a taser crackling. Then silence. The darkness wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with the electric crackle of a taser missing its mark. When the lights cut out at L'Obsidienne, Cassidy didn't freeze. For 3 years, she had worked the closing shift at a dive bar in the Bronx, where power outages were common and brawls were expected. While Garrick Sterling was adjusting his eyes to the sudden gloom, Cassidy was already moving. She dropped to the floor. Zit! The taser arc slashed through the air right where her chest had been a second before. She heard Brock, the massive head of security, curse in the dark. "She's down, I got her." "No, you idiot, you hit the chair," Sterling hissed. "Find her turn on the tactical lights." Cassidy scrambled on her hands and knees. The plush carpet, usually so soft, felt like quicksand. She knew the layout of the restaurant better than the billionaire who owned the building. She knew that Table 1 was exactly 12 steps from the service corridor. She crawled, counting. 1, 2, 3. Beams of blinding white light cut through the darkness. Brock and the second guard had drawn tactical flashlights. The beams swept the room like lighthouse searchlights, looking for a drowning sailor. One beam passed inches over Cassidy's head. She flattened herself against the mahogany sideboard. "Seal the exits," Sterling shouted. "Nobody leaves this floor. Kill the elevators." Cassidy rolled into the service corridor just as a beam of light illuminated the spot where she had been. She kicked the swinging door shut behind her. She was in the back of house, the narrow, sterile hallway, used by servers to carry dirty dishes. It smelled of bleach and stale coffee. This was her world. She didn't run to the elevators. That was a rookie mistake. The elevators were death traps now. She didn't run to the fire stairs. They had cameras and alarms. Instead, Cassidy ran to the laundry chute. It was a narrow metal hatch near the linen closet, used to drop bags of dirty tablecloths down to the sub-basement laundry facility, 45 floors below. It was a terrifying drop designed for fabric, not flesh. She heard the service door crash open behind her. "She went back here," Brock yelled. Cassidy ripped open the hatch. The smell of cold air and mildew wafted up. It was a pitch-black abyss. If she jumped straight down, she would die, but she knew the chute curved at the 41st floor to slow the velocity of the bags. "There!" A flashlight beam hit her face. Cassidy didn't hesitate. She grabbed a half-full laundry bag made of heavy canvas, hugged it to her chest like a life preserver, and threw herself head-first into the metal throat of the building. The scream caught in her throat. The slide was terrifying. She tumbled, the metal scraping against her uniform, the speed building until her stomach was in her throat. She hit the curve on the 40th floor hard, bruising her ribs, but the laundry bag absorbed the worst of it. She kept sliding. Down, down, past the law offices, past the investment banks. She tumbled out of the chute into a massive wire cart filled with dirty linens in the sub-basement. She landed with a soft thump, gasping for air covered in dust and lint. She scrambled out of the cart. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was alive. But she wasn't safe. The sub-basement was a labyrinth of pipes and steam tunnels. She could hear the freight elevator humming. They were coming down. Cassidy ran. She pushed through a heavy steel door labeled "No Exit, Alarm Will Sound." She ignored the sign. The alarm blared a piercing, rhythmic shriek that echoed off the concrete walls. Good. Let the noise confuse them. She burst out into the alleyway behind the skyscraper. The freezing November rain hit her like a physical blow, soaking her instantly. The city noise, honking taxis, sirens, the rumble of the subway was the sweetest music she had ever heard. She didn't stop. She sprinted down the alley, her Waitress shoes splashing through puddles of oil and grime. She didn't look back at the glass tower piercing the clouds. She needed to disappear. She needed to become invisible again. She ran for 4 blocks until her lungs burned. She ducked into a crowded subway station at 51st Street. She jumped the turnstile, ignoring the shout of the station attendant, and threw herself into a waiting E-train just as the doors hissed shut. She collapsed onto the hard orange plastic seat, surrounded by tired commuters who barely glanced at the soaking, wet, shivering Waitress. She reached into her apron pocket. Her phone was there, but she didn't turn it on. Sterling had the resources to triangulate a signal in minutes. She took the phone, placed it on the floor of the subway car, and crushed it under her heel. Then she kicked the pieces under the seat. She was off the grid. She was a ghost. But ghosts have unfinished business. The safe house wasn't a house. It was a dusty, book-filled apartment above a failing antique watch repair shop in Queens. The air smelled of turpentine and old paper. Cassidy sat on a velvet armchair that had seen better days, wrapped in a wool blanket. Across from her sat Elias Graham. Elias was a relic of a bygone era. He was 70 years old, with nicotine-stained fingers and a face that looked like crumpled parchment. He had been Theodore Miller's lawyer 20 years ago, before the fire, before the fall. He was the only man her father had trusted. "You shouldn't have done it, kid," Elias rasped, pouring 2 fingers of cheap bourbon into a dirty glass. "You poked the bear. No, you didn't just poke him. You slapped him in the face with a raw steak. He killed my mother." "Elias," Cassidy said, her voice trembling but hard. "I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear. He knows I know." "He knows you know what?" Elias asked, sliding the glass across the low table. "That he wanted the lithium. Everyone knows Sterling is a shark. That's not a crime, that's Wall Street." "The arson," Cassidy said. "The murder. I told him about the Zurich box." Elias froze. He took a long, slow sip of his drink. "You told him about the box?" "I told him the password was his ring number. I bluffed." Elias let out a dry, wheezing laugh. A bluff? Jesus, you're your father's daughter. But here is the problem, Cassidy. The Zurich box. It isn't just an insurance policy against Sterling. Cassidy frowned. What do you mean Dad told me it contained the proof that Sterling hired the arsonist? Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked old and tired. Cassidy, your father wasn't a saint. Theodore was the CFO of Oakhaven Corp. Sterling didn't just hostile take over the company. Your father, he was helping him. The room went silent. The ticking of 100 clocks downstairs seemed to grow louder. What? Cassidy whispered. Theodore was in debt. Elias explained, his voice gentle but relentless. Gambling debts. Bad ones. He agreed to devalue the property so Sterling could buy it cheap. They were partners, Cassidy. The plan was to burn the archives to hide the embezzlement claim, the insurance money, and sell the land to Sterling. Cassidy felt like she had been punched in the gut. No, that's a lie. My father is innocent. That's why he's in prison. He's in prison because Sterling double-crossed him, Elias said. Sterling decided he didn't want to share the lithium profits. So he rigged the fire to burn the whole house, not just the office. He meant to kill all of you. Your father survived and went to jail to hide from Sterling's hitmen. But the documents in Zurich, they don't just incriminate Sterling for murder. They incriminate your father for fraud and conspiracy. Cassidy stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. So, if I open that box, I destroy Sterling, but I also ensure my father never gets out of prison. Exactly, Elias said. Mutually assured destruction. That's why Sterling hasn't killed your father in prison yet. He knows if Theodore dies, the lawyer in Zurich releases the contents automatically. It's a stalemate, a cold war. Cassidy walked to the window. She looked out at the rain-slicked streets of Queens. Her entire crusade, the 3 jobs, the legal appeals, the hatred for Sterling, it was all based on a half-truth. Her father wasn't a hero. He was a co-conspirator who got outplayed. I don't care, Cassidy said softly. Elias blinked. What? Cassidy turned around. Her eyes were dry. The naive waitress was gone. In her place was something harder, sharper. My father made his choices, Cassidy said. He played with fire and he got burned. But my mother, she was innocent. She didn't sign anything. She didn't agree to anything. Sterling murdered her to save a few $1 million. I don't care if my father rots in jail. I want Sterling. I want to see him lose everything. Elias looked at her with a mix of fear and admiration. So what's the play? You can't go to Zurich. Sterling will have every airport watched. He has facial recognition software that makes the FBI look like amateurs. I don't need to go to Zurich, Cassidy said. I lied to him about the ring being the password, but I wasn't lying about the ring being the key. I don't follow. I remembered something else, Elias, from that night under the desk. Cassidy paced the room. When they were arguing, Sterling slammed his hand on the desk. He was wearing that ring. He said, "This seal is the only thing that matters, Theodore. It opens the doors that the law cannot." Cassidy looked at Elias. Sterling is old school. He doesn't trust the cloud. He doesn't trust digital banks. He keeps his personal leverage, his black book of bribes, the real accounting of his empire, on a physical drive. And I bet my life that the encryption key to that drive is biometrically linked to that signet ring. Elias leaned forward. You think he carries the evidence of his crimes on him? Arrogance is his weakness, Cassidy said. He wears his power. He flaunts it. If I can get that ring, or a copy of it, I can access his private server at Vanguard. I can find the emails, the wire transfers to the arsonist, everything. Cassidy, Elias warned. To do that, you have to get close to him again. He has an army around him now. He will shoot you on sight. No, he won't. Cassidy smiled grimly. Because he thinks I'm running. He thinks I'm trying to leave the country. He's watching the airports. He's not watching his own living room. And how do you propose to get into the living room of the most paranoid man in New York? Tomorrow night, Cassidy said. The Met Gala. Sterling is the co-chair. He has to be there, and L'Obsidienne is catering the event. Elias shook his head. You're fired, remember. You can't just walk in. I'm not going as a waitress, Cassidy said, picking up a pair of scissors from the desk. She looked at her long brown hair in the reflection of the window. And Cassidy Miller isn't going at all. She raised the scissors and cut a thick lock of hair. Cassidy Miller is dead, she whispered. It's time for the ghost of Oak Haven to crash the party. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of glamour. The red carpet was a river of blood-red velvet flanked by paparazzi whose flashbulbs popped like stroboscopic lightning. Inside, the Temple of Denda was transformed. Champagne flowed like water. The air glittered with diamonds and the scent of expensive perfume. Garrick Sterling stood near the Egyptian sandstone, holding a glass of champagne he hadn't sipped. He looked calm, regal even in his tuxedo, but his eyes were darting. Every time a waiter passed, he flinched. "Relax, sir," Brock murmured into his earpiece, standing 5 feet away. "We have facial recognition at every entrance. We have snipers on the balcony. She's not here. Our sources say she was spotted buying a bus ticket to Montreal." Sterling loosened his bow tie slightly. "Good. Find her. End it." He didn't notice the woman in the black dress standing by the statue of Sekhmet. She was striking. Her hair was a jagged platinum blonde bob, a sharp contrast to the conservative bun Cassidy used to wear. She wore heavy makeup, dark lipstick, and a vintage Chanel gown that Elias had borrowed from a wealthy client's estate sale. She looked like a bored European heiress, one of the hundreds of socialites who drifted through these events. Cassidy had walked right past the security checkpoint, the invitation forged by Elias, who, despite his drunk exterior, was a master of document fabrication. The facial recognition. It didn't flag her because she kept her chin down, used contouring makeup to alter the shape of her nose, and most importantly, walked with the arrogance of someone who belonged there. Waitresses walk quickly, apologetically, trying not to take up space. Heiresses walk slowly, taking up as much space as they want. Cassidy watched Sterling. She needed the ring. She had a device in her clutch purse, a high-resolution 3D scanner disguised as a compact mirror. If she could get within 2 feet of his hand for 3 seconds, the scanner would map the surface of the ring, the ridges, the depth of the crest. Elias could then 3D print a replica in resin within an hour. But getting close was the problem. Brock was hovering like a guard dog. She needed a distraction. Cassidy scanned the room. She saw Senator Mitchell, a man Sterling had publicly humiliated in a Senate hearing last year, currently drinking heavily near the bar. Cassidy signaled a waiter, a boy she recognized from L'Obsidienne, though he didn't recognize her in this guise. She grabbed a glass of red wine from his tray. She walked past Senator Mitchell and deliberately bumped into him, spilling a few drops on his sleeve. "Oh, I am so clumsy," she said, adopting a vague German accent. "But isn't that Garrick Sterling over there? The man who called you a fiscal illiterate on CNN." The senator, already angry and drunk, looked up. His face went red. "He's laughing at you," Cassidy whispered, twisting the knife. "Look at him, smirking." It was a lie. Sterling wasn't smirking. He was grimacing, but the senator didn't care. Fueled by gin and wounded pride, Senator Mitchell stormed across the room toward Sterling. "Sterling!" the senator roared. The crowd parted. Sterling turned annoyed. "Mitchell, not now! You think you own this city? Mitchell shouted, poking Sterling in the chest. Brock stepped forward to intervene, leaving Sterling's left side exposed. This was the moment. Cassidy glided in. She moved like liquid. As the senator shouted, and Brock tried to restrain him, a crowd gathered, pushing in to see the drama. Cassidy let the crowd push her right into Sterling. "Oh my," she gasped, stumbling into him. She grabbed his left hand, the hand with the ring, to steady herself. "Watch it," Sterling snapped, pulling his hand away. But she had held it. For 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The compact mirror in her other hand buzzed silently against her palm. Scan complete. She had it. "My apologies," she murmured, bowing her head. Sterling glared at her. For a split second, his eyes locked onto hers. A flicker of recognition sparked in his gaze, not of her face, but of her eyes. The same eyes that had stared him down in the restaurant. "Wait," Sterling said, reaching out to grab her arm. Cassidy spun away, melting back into the crowd. "Brock!" Sterling screamed, ignoring the senator. "The girl, blonde hair, black dress." The room erupted into chaos. Security guards began shoving guests aside. Cassidy kicked off her high heels. She couldn't run in them. She dropped the expensive shoes on the marble floor and sprinted barefoot toward the kitchen service entrance. "Stop her!" Brock yelled, spotting her white blonde hair moving through the sea of tuxedos. Cassidy burst through the kitchen doors. The chefs looked up, startled. This was familiar territory. She vaulted over a prep table, grabbed a handful of flour, and threw it into the air behind her, creating a white cloud to obscure the vision of the guards bursting in. She didn't go for the exit. She knew the perimeter was sealed. She ran to the staff locker room. She ripped open a locker, any locker. She found a chef's coat and a hat. She pulled them on over her gown. She grabbed a crate of vegetables. She walked out the back loading dock, head down, carrying the crate. "Hey, you!" A police officer at the loading dock shouted. Cassidy froze. "Where is the blonde girl?" the cop asked. "She ran up the fire escape," Cassidy shouted, pointing upward, with her chin deepening her voice. "She had a gun." The cop drew his weapon and ran toward the fire escape. Cassidy walked the crate to a waiting delivery truck, set it down, and kept walking. She walked until she turned the corner. Then she ran. She had the scan. She had the key. But as she reached the rendezvous point where Elias was waiting in a battered sedan, her phone buzzed. It was a new burner phone, one only Elias had the number for. She looked at the screen. It wasn't Elias. It was a text message. Attached Imager live video feed. It showed a prison cell. An old man, her father, was sitting on his bunk. A massive inmate was standing behind him, holding a shiv to his throat. The text read, "Bring the ring to the Vanguard Tower, penthouse, midnight," or "Theodore bleeds out. Checkmate Cassidy." Cassidy stared at the screen. Sterling had known. He had anticipated the move. He didn't need to catch her at the party. He just needed to let her think she had won so she would bring the key to him. She looked at Elias in the car. He was smiling, holding up the 3D printer he had set up in the back seat. "We got it, kid. We're ready to burn him down." Cassidy looked at the printer. Then she looked at the phone. She couldn't save her father and destroy Sterling. She had to choose. "Drive," Cassidy said, opening the car door. "Where to?" "The FBI." "No," Cassidy said, clutching the phone until her knuckles turned white. "To Vanguard Tower. We're going to finish this." The Vanguard Tower didn't look like a building. It looked like a needle specifically designed to puncture the sky. It was a monolith of black glass and steel standing apart from the rest of the skyline, arrogant and solitary. Cassidy stood at the base of the tower. The rain had stopped leaving the streets of Manhattan, slick and reflecting the neon red of the Vanguard logo, glowing 50 stories above. She wore the chef's coat she had stolen from the Met Gala, now stained with grease and rain. Underneath the ruined Chanel gown was tattered. She looked like a wreck. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had crawled through the mud to get to the throne room. "You don't have to go up there," Elias said. He was sitting in the driver's seat of the sedan, the engine idling. The 3D printer in the back seat was silent now. In Cassidy's pocket sat the result, a small dark grey resin ring, an exact topographic replica of Garrick Sterling's signet. "He has my father, Elias," Cassidy said, staring at the revolving doors. "He says he has your father," Elias corrected, tapping the steering wheel nervously. "Whatever happens up there, remember that Sterling is a trader. He buys and sells. He doesn't destroy an asset unless he can't sell it. You are the asset now." "I'm not an asset," Cassidy said, touching the cold resin in her pocket. "I'm a liability." She slammed the car door and walked into the lobby. The lobby was empty, save for a single security guard at the desk. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask her name. He simply pressed a button under the desk and pointed to the far elevator. The one with no buttons, the private express lift to the penthouse. They were expecting her. Cassidy stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut with a hiss like a coffin closing. As the car began its rapid ascent, her ears popped. She watched the floor numbers blur. 10, 20, 30. She closed her eyes. She thought of the smell of smoke, the sound of the timber snapping at Oakhaven, the weight of her mother's hand in hers before it slipped away. She wasn't 24 anymore. She wasn't a waitress. She was the fire that had survived. Ding! The doors opened. The penthouse was vast. It spanned the entire top floor, a glass box floating in the clouds. The only light came from the city below, and the massive aquarium that made up one entire wall, filled with sharks that circled endlessly in the blue gloom. Garrick Sterling stood by the fireplace. A real wood fire, a luxury in New York, crackled in the hearth. He held a tumbler of scotch. He looked impeccable, untouched by the chaos of the night. Brock stood by the door, his face bruised from the laundry chute, Chase a gun holstered openly on his hip. "You look terrible, my dear," Sterling said, his voice smooth, echoing off the hard surfaces. "The chef's coat is a nice touch. Very working class." "Where is he?" Cassidy asked. Her voice was hoarse. Sterling gestured to a large monitor mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. The live feed. Her father, Theodore Miller, sat on the cot in his cell. The large inmate with the shiv was still there, looming in the shadow. "Dad!" Cassidy stepped forward. On the screen, Theodore looked up. He looked tired, old, and broken. "Cassidy!" His voice came through the speakers, tinny and delayed. "I'm here, Dad," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm going to get you out. Just give him what he wants, Cass," Theodore said, his voice trembling. "Please, I don't want to die in here." Sterling took a sip of his scotch. Touching. "Now the ring." He held out his hand. Cassidy reached into her pocket. She pulled out the resin ring. It looked almost like a toy, dull and grey, compared to the gold on Sterling's finger. "This is it," Sterling scoffed. "A piece of plastic." "It's a master key," Cassidy said. "I scanned the topography. It will bypass the biometric lock on your physical drive. It's what you wanted." "Bring it here," Sterling commanded. Cassidy didn't move. "Let him go first. Call the hitman off." Sterling laughed. He walked over to his desk, a massive slab of obsidian. On the desk sat a standalone server tower. It was disconnected from the internet, an air-gapped vault. The Black Book. "You don't understand the leverage here, Cassidy," Sterling said. "You hand me the replica. I destroy it. Then I allow your father to live another day. If you refuse, Brock shoots you, I take the replica, and your father bleeds out. You have no cards." Cassidy looked at the screen. She looked at her father's terrified face. "Dad," she whispered, I can't let him get away with Mum's murder." Theodore's face on the screen changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp annoyance. "Martha is dead, Cassidy," Theodore snapped. "She's been dead for 20 years. Stop living in the past. Think about the future. Think about my future." Cassidy froze. The tone. It wasn't the tone of a terrified hostage. It was the tone of a parent scolding a disobedient child. "What did you say?" Cassidy whispered. "I said give him the damn ring," Theodore yelled. "We had a deal. He promised to move me to minimum security. He promised a trust fund for when I get out. Don't ruin this for me." The silence that filled the penthouse was louder than the gunshot would have been. Cassidy stared at the screen. She looked at the inmate standing behind her father. The inmate wasn't holding the shiv to Theodore's throat anymore. He was leaning against the wall, bored, checking his fingernails. It wasn't a hostage situation. It was a conference call. Sterling chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? Or maybe it does." Theodore was always pragmatic. You are burdened by morality. You're working with him," Cassidy asked, her voice breaking. "You helped him kill Mum, and now you're helping him kill me." "I'm surviving," Theodore shouted. "Sterling is too big to beat Cassidy. You can't fight a god. You join him or you get crushed. Now give him the ring and go back to waiting tables." Something inside Cassidy Miller died in that moment. The little girl who wanted to save her daddy. She evaporated. The waitress who worked 3 jobs to pay for lawyers. She vanished. All that was left was the ash, and ash cannot be burned. Cassidy looked at Sterling. She stopped crying. Her face went completely slack, void of emotion. She looked at the resin ring in her hand. "You're right, Dad," Cassidy said softly. "I can't fight a god." She walked toward Sterling's desk. Sterling smiled. He set down his glass. "Smart girl. Bring it here." Cassidy walked past Brock. She walked up to the obsidian desk. She looked at the server tower. It had a small indentation on the top, a reader designed to fit the signet ring. "Put it in the reader," Sterling ordered. "Let's verify the scan works before we destroy it." Cassidy held the ring over the reader. "Do it," Sterling said. Cassidy looked him in the eye. "You know, Mr. Sterling, there's one thing about service staff you forgot." "And what is that?" "We know how to multitask." Cassidy didn't place the ring in the reader gently. She slammed it down, jamming it into the slot. The server beeped. "Access granted." "Good." Sterling reached for the server, but Cassidy wasn't done. With her other hand, she pulled a small flashing device from her pocket, Elias's masterstroke. It was a wireless bridge, a hacking tool. Before Sterling could react, she jammed the bridge into the USB port next to the ring reader. "What are you doing?" Sterling roared. "Uploading," Cassidy said. "Brock, kill her." Brock lunged, but Cassidy grabbed the heavy bottle of scotch from the desk and swung it with all the rage of 20 years of silence. It connected with Brock's temple with a sickening crunch. The giant man stumbled back, crashing into the glass coffee table. Sterling scrambled for a drawer, a gun. Cassidy vaulted over the desk. She wasn't trying to fight him. She was guarding the connection. "It's too late," Cassidy screamed. "The bridge is active. Elias has the signal. Stop it." Sterling screamed, his composure shattering. He fumbled with the gun, his hands shaking violently. He aimed at her. "Shoot me," Cassidy yelled, standing in front of the server. "Shoot me and you shoot the drive. You destroy your own money." Sterling froze. He couldn't pull the trigger. The server was his life, his empire, his soul. On the computer screen, a progress bar raced. Transferring 80%, 90%. "What are you doing?" Sterling gasped. "Sending it to the FBI. I own the FBI. I'll have the evidence suppressed before sunrise." Cassidy smiled, a bloody, terrifying smile. "I didn't send it to the FBI, Garrick." She pointed to the window, to the city. "Look." Sterling turned to the window. 2 blocks away, Times Square was glowing. The massive digital billboards, usually playing ads for Coca-Cola and fashion brands, flickered. Then they went black. A second later, they lit up again. But not with ads. They were displaying documents, thousands of them, scrolling at high speed, bank transfers, emails, photos of burnt houses, the coroner's bribed report, and then a video played on the largest screen, the Nasdaq Tower. It was a video from 20 years ago, a security camera footage from the Oak Haven estate, time-stamped the night of the fire. It showed a younger Garrick Sterling handing a heavy bag to a man with a gas can. "I sent it to everyone," Cassidy whispered. "The news stations, YouTube, Reddit, the cloud. It's trending, Garrick. Right now. You're not just a criminal. You're the world's most viral villain." Sterling stared out the window. He could see the people in Times Square stopping, pointing. He could see the traffic halting. The phone on his desk began to ring. Then his cell phone. Then the landline. It was a cacophony of panic. "No," Sterling whispered. He dropped the gun. He fell to his knees. "My stock, my legacy." On the monitor above the fireplace, Theodore Miller was silent. The feed cut to black. The inmate had probably realized the game was up and fled. Theodore was alone in his cell, and soon everyone would know what he did too. Cassidy pulled the USB drive out. She pulled the resin ring out of the slot and crushed it in her hand. She walked past the groaning Brock. She walked past the kneeling billionaire who was watching his net worth disintegrate on the screens of the city he thought he owned. Sterling didn't try to stop her. He was a ghost now. Cassidy walked to the elevator. She pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, she saw Sterling pouring another drink, his hand shaking so hard, the glass rattled against his teeth. The descent was smooth. When Cassidy walked out of the Vanguard Tower, the police cars were already screeching to a halt. Blue and red lights painted the wet pavement. SWAT teams were shouting, running toward the revolving doors. They rushed past Cassidy. They didn't even see her. She was just a girl in a dirty coat. She was invisible again. She walked to the sedan where Elias was waiting. He was staring at his tablet, mouth open, watching the global news feed. "You did it," Elias whispered. "Kid, you just crashed the market. Sterling Vanguard stock is down 60% in 3 minutes. The DOJ just issued an arrest warrant." Cassidy opened the door and sat in the passenger seat. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "Take me to the diner," she said. "The diner? Which diner?" "The one on 4th. I have a shift in 20 minutes. Elias looked at her stunned. You just took down the richest man in New York. You're a hero. You're not going to work." Cassidy opened her eyes. She looked at the rain washing the grime off the window. "I'm not a hero, Elias. I'm a waitress, and I'm never late." She paused, and for the first time in 20 years, a genuine smile touched her lips. "Besides, I think tonight the customers are going to tip really well." As the car pulled away, merging into the traffic of a city that was waking up to the truth, the camera pans up past the wet streets, up past the chaos of the police cruisers, up the side of the black monolith tower, all the way to the penthouse. Through the glass, we see a silhouette standing alone, small and insignificant, against the vast, unforgiving lights of the city. And that is the story of Cassidy Miller, the waitress who didn't just serve water, she served justice cold. Garrick Sterling was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. His assets were seized and used to pay reparations to the families he destroyed. As for Cassidy's father, his deal was revoked. He's currently sharing a cell block with the very man he tried to protect. It's a chilling reminder that in the game of power, the most dangerous piece on the board is the pawn that decides to become a queen. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking down giants, subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an upload. What would you have done if you were Cassidy? Would you have traded the ring for your father's life? Let me know in the comments below. I'm your name, and I'll see you in the next story.